My name is Olivia. I'm 40 years old. Today I want to say that I funded my brother's family for years. Then he called me a loser and banned me from his birthday party. It's a pleasure to have you here. Stay tuned until the end, and tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story has gone. And click on like, subscribe and activate the bell, so you don't miss the next stories here on the channel. I was 30 when my father died. Daniel was 22. He had never worked a steady job, but Dad always gave him the benefit of the doubt. He used to say, "Boys take longer to grow up." I never agreed with that, but I stayed quiet. After the funeral, the silence in our house was different. It wasn't grief, it was a shift of weight. Everything now fell on me. Daniel moved in with Mom and stopped pretending to look for a job. He slept most of the day, and when he was awake, he played video games or went out with friends. Mom would make excuses for him. "He's just struggling, Olivia. Losing a father is harder for a boy." Meanwhile, I was working 2 jobs. One at a local insurance firm, the other doing freelance bookkeeping on weekends. I started covering groceries, utility bills, and eventually even Daniel's phone plan. When his car broke down, I paid for the repairs. When Mom's roof leaked, I paid for that too. Just until things settle, I told myself. But nothing settled. It only became routine. By the time I turned 35, Daniel had 2 kids with a woman he barely knew. She left when the youngest was still a baby. Mom cried and called me at work, panicking. I picked up the kids from daycare, bought diapers and formula, and stayed up with them at night so Daniel could sleep. Then I'd go to work the next morning exhausted. Mom treated Daniel like a hero for stepping up. He never cooked, never cleaned, never changed a diaper. But she called him brave. She called me practical. Sometimes I'd hear her on the phone with her sisters. "Daniel's been through so much." Olivia helps, of course. She's always been so capable. Capable. Not kind. Not loving. Capable. Like I was a tool. One Sunday I made lasagna and brought it over. I had barely sat down when Mom asked, "Do you think you could pay for Daniel's car insurance this month? He's trying so hard." I snapped. Not loud, not angry. Just tired. I said, "No, Mom. I can't keep doing this. I need to think about my own future too." She blinked like I'd slapped her. Daniel stood up from the couch, scoffed, and walked out the back door. Nobody followed him. Nobody said a word. I cleaned up the dishes alone. That night, I got a message from Daniel. It read, "Don't bother coming around if you're going to act like you're better than us. You're not. You're just a bitter, lonely loser." I stared at it for minutes. I didn't cry. I just sat there, my heart beating like I'd run a mile. The next day, I checked the family group chat. I had been removed. A few weeks passed. I heard nothing from any of them. Then came Daniel's birthday. I texted Mom to ask what time the party was. She replied, "It's best if you don't come. Things are still tense, and we don't want drama." I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time after that. They were having a party. For him. With balloons and cake and laughter. And I, the one who paid for the cake year after year, wasn't welcome. That was the moment it finally clicked. I was never part of the family. I was the wallet. The helper. The outsider with the key to the back door, never the front. I didn't go to the party. I didn't text again. I didn't answer when Mom called weeks later. I just went quiet. But in the silence, something new was growing. A question. Not about them, but about me. What would my life look like if I stopped trying to be wanted by people who only saw me as useful? That thought didn't hurt. It felt like air. Like opening a window in a house I didn't know was suffocating me. And once that window opened, I couldn't close it. For the first time in my life, I went a full month without speaking to anyone in my family. No texts. No calls. No random drop-ins with groceries or toys. I didn't ask how Daniel's kids were doing. I didn't send money. I didn't check if Mom needed anything. And the world didn't fall apart. That surprised me. What I noticed first wasn't relief. It was a strange kind of silence. Like when a refrigerator finally stops humming, and you realize how loud it had been all along. My life was suddenly still. I had evenings to myself. I went to sleep without worrying if I had forgotten to transfer money. I stopped checking my phone obsessively. It felt weird at first, like I was being irresponsible. Then it felt good. But with the silence came a wave of emotions I had never let myself feel. Not just sadness or disappointment. There was grief. And anger. Deep old anger I didn't even recognize at first. I started therapy. Just 1 hour every Thursday evening with a soft-voiced woman named Dr. Keller. The first session, I tried to talk about Daniel, about how unfair it all was. Dr. Keller listened. Then she asked, "What would it mean for you if they never changed?" I didn't know how to answer that. I had never let myself consider it. I had spent decades believing that if I just worked harder, gave more, proved my worth louder, they would see me, love me, thank me. What would it mean if they never did? That question haunted me. I started looking at old photos, birthdays, Christmases. In every picture, I was the one behind the camera, or washing dishes, or sitting alone while everyone else laughed. I remembered a Thanksgiving when I was 14. Mom burned the turkey, and I stayed up until midnight helping her cook something else. She told everyone Daniel had saved the day, because he distracted the little cousins. Everyone clapped for him. No one said my name. That memory broke something in me. I realized I had been invisible for a long time. Not because I was small, but because they needed me to be. I started noticing how quiet my apartment was, and how peaceful that quiet could be. I picked up old hobbies. I painted a bookshelf. I bought a plant. I went to a movie alone. For once, I did things because I wanted to, not because I had to. Then one Sunday, I got a text from Mom. "Daniel's kids are sick. Can you help with medicine?" No greeting. No how are you. Just a request. A command almost. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, "I'm not available. I hope they feel better." And I didn't send money. The response came 3 hours later. "Wow. I didn't raise you to be so heartless." I didn't reply. That night I cried. Not because of what she said, but because of how familiar it felt. That weight. That guilt. The idea that love was something you earned through sacrifice. That you had to bleed to be seen. I didn't want to live like that anymore. I started making changes. Quiet ones. I removed my name from the joint grocery delivery account. I canceled the old card Mom used for household emergencies. I changed my Netflix password. And then slowly, I let myself imagine a life without them. Not out of hatred, out of necessity. At work, I started speaking up more. I offered to lead a project I used to be too nervous to touch. My boss noticed. I got a raise. Not huge, but mine. One Friday, I bought myself a small gold necklace. Nothing fancy, just something beautiful that I didn't have to justify. I wore it to a friend's dinner party. Someone complimented it. I smiled and said thank you without explaining it was on sale, or a gift to myself. Just thank you. It felt like magic. Weeks passed. Then out of nowhere, Daniel showed up at my door. He looked exhausted. Hair a mess, kids in tow, eyes darting everywhere. "Can we come in?" he asked. I opened the door a little wider, but didn't step back. "We're out of options," he said. "We got evicted. I lost my job. Mom's sick and can't help right now." He looked at me like I was the last lifeboat. I looked at the kids, tired, quiet, clinging to his legs. My heart twisted. They were innocent in all of this. But I looked back at him and said, "You need to call Mom. She always believed in you. She'll find a way." He blinked. "You're really going to turn us away?" I didn't answer. I just closed the door and leaned against it, breathing heavy, shaking, but not crying. Because for the first time in my life, I had chosen me. Don't forget to like, subscribe and activate the bell to receive all notifications, so you don't miss the next story. For a while after Daniel showed up, I expected backlash. I thought Mom would call screaming, or that Daniel would send another message full of insults. But there was nothing. Silence again. That silence this time didn't feel peaceful. It felt like a wall. It was my birthday the following week. I didn't expect anything, hadn't celebrated with them in years, but I still checked my phone more than I wanted to admit. Not even a text. That night, I sat on my couch with a slice of grocery store cake I'd bought myself. I lit a candle, blew it out, and whispered, "Happy birthday, Olivia." Just to hear someone say it. A few days later, I ran into Aunt Linda at the pharmacy. Her eyes widened like she'd seen a ghost. She walked over and said, Your mom said you've gone cold. That you abandoned the family. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just nodded and said, "Take care, Aunt Linda," and left. Let them believe what they want. Let them build their version of me. I wasn't going to fight for a place in a story that never had room for me. But even knowing that, the loneliness was sharp. One night, I looked through an old drawer and found a birthday card from my dad from years ago. His handwriting was neat and firm. To my girl Olivia. You're the strongest person I know. I held that card like a lifeline. Because even if he hadn't been perfect, he saw me. That week, I talked to Dr. Keller about the kids. I feel guilty for not helping, I admitted. They didn't ask to be born into this. She said something I never forgot. Protecting them doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. Sometimes, being an example of self-respect is the best gift you can give. It didn't erase the guilt, but it softened it. Around that time, something in me started to shift again. Not just pulling away from them, but pulling toward myself. I started asking real questions. What do I want? What makes me happy? Who am I when I'm not trying to earn love? I had no idea. So I started small. I took a weekend trip. Alone. No explanations, no guilt. Just me, a packed bag, and a quiet cabin by the lake. I sat on the porch and read a book from start to finish. I watched ducks on the water. I cooked pasta with too much garlic and ate it all. No one needed me. No one called. It felt like disappearing, but in a way that made me visible to myself. When I got home, I made a list of boundaries. No financial help. No emotional caretaking. No attending events out of guilt. I taped it to the fridge. That same week, Mom called. First time in months. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was short. I don't know what's gotten into you, Olivia, but I hope you come to your senses soon. Daniel's struggling, and this family doesn't feel right without you. I listened to it 3 times. Not once did she ask how I was. Not once did she say she missed me. Just that I was needed. Needed but never loved. I deleted the message. Then I got another call. This time from my cousin Rachel. We hadn't spoken in years. She asked if I wanted to get coffee. We met at a small cafe near my work. I expected awkwardness, maybe pity. But Rachel looked me in the eye and said, "I heard what happened. And I just want you to know, I think you're brave." I almost cried into my coffee. We talked for 2 hours. She told me she had distanced herself from the family too, years ago, after her father blamed her for her mother's depression. We weren't so different after all. That coffee turned into weekly meetups. Then yoga classes. Then dinners. We weren't rebuilding a family, we were building something new. Something chosen. I started to understand that family doesn't always look the way we're told it should. It's not just blood. Sometimes it's the people who sit beside you when you're learning to breathe again. And slowly, breath by breath, I was becoming someone I had never been allowed to be. 3 months passed. I hadn't seen Daniel. I hadn't spoken to Mom. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. The freedom felt light. Almost too light, like I'd forgotten to carry something important. Then I realized I'd just been carrying everyone else's weight for so long that my own life felt unfamiliar without it. Rachel and I kept meeting weekly. We talked about everything: work, memories, books, childhood wounds. I told her things I had never said out loud. Like how, as a teenager, I used to pretend I had stomachaches just to skip family dinners, because I couldn't bear sitting next to Mom praising Daniel for breathing. She didn't flinch. She nodded and said, "Me too." Around that time, I started redecorating my apartment. Nothing major, just small things. Brighter curtains. A new lamp. I hung artwork I liked instead of hand-me-downs. The space began to feel like mine for the first time. One day, while sorting old files, I found a folder labeled family. Inside were receipts. Hundreds of them. Years of utility bills, tuition fees, birthday gifts, grocery runs, all paid by me. I sat on the floor and flipped through them. Gasps of my own history. Each one a reminder of how much I'd given. And how little had been returned. I scanned and archived everything. Not out of pettiness. Just to remind myself that it had happened. That I wasn't imagining the weight of it. Then one Friday evening, Mom showed up at my door. She looked older. Smaller. But her tone was the same. "I don't know what happened to you. she said as soon as I opened the door. You used to be so good. So generous. I didn't invite her in. She kept talking. Daniel's in a tough spot. He's looking for work. The kids need school clothes. I thought maybe you'd come to your senses by now. I leaned on the doorframe calm. I didn't lose my generosity, Mom. I just stopped giving it to people who never gave it back. She frowned. You always were dramatic. There it was. The line. The dismissal. I think you should go, I said softly. She stared at me like she didn't recognize the person in front of her. Maybe she didn't. Maybe that was the point. She left without saying goodbye. I stood there for a while, the silence wrapping around me like a coat. And then I smiled. Not a triumphant smile. A quiet one. The kind that says, I'm okay. A few days later, I made a decision. I sold my apartment. It wasn't impulsive. I had been thinking about it for weeks. I didn't want to stay in a place where every corner whispered old obligations. I found a smaller place across town, in a neighborhood with community gardens and local bakeries. A space just big enough for me. And peace. Moving day was bittersweet, but when I set the last box down and looked around my new home, I felt something settle inside me. Not closure. Something better. A beginning. I sent Rachel my new address. She showed up with wine and flowers. We sat on the floor and talked for hours. You seem lighter, she said. I feel lighter, I replied. We toasted to new roots. That night, I stood by the window, watching the quiet street below. No shouting. No chaos. Just stillness. I thought about the children. Daniel's kids. I still wondered how they were. But I also knew I couldn't save them at the cost of myself. Maybe one day they'd find their way to me. And if they did, I'd be here. Whole. Ready. But until then, I was building something. Not revenge. Not distance. A life. My own. 6 months passed. I stopped keeping track of birthdays. I stopped wondering what they'd say about me. It was like my family had become background noise that had finally faded into silence. I filled that space with new things. I took a pottery class. I burned dinner and laughed instead of crying. I got a cat named Henry who hated everyone except me. I started waking up without dread. One morning, I received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. It was from Daniel. The handwriting was messy, rushed, like he didn't know if he'd finish it. He wrote, Olivia, you probably don't want to hear from me. I get it. I was angry. You were right to do what you did. I messed up. A lot. I lost the apartment. I lost another job. I've been staying with friends, bouncing around. The kids are okay. I think. I try. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. For the way I treated you. For calling you names. For taking and never giving. You didn't deserve it. I don't expect anything. Just wanted to say it. Daniel. I read it twice. Then I folded it and placed it in a drawer. I didn't cry. I didn't feel vindicated either. Just still. Like I'd been standing in the middle of a storm for years, and hadn't realized it had passed. Dr. Keller asked what I wanted to do with the letter. I told her I didn't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe just keep it. Not as an invitation back, but as proof that I wasn't crazy. That my pain had been real. She nodded. Sometimes closure doesn't come in conversation, she said. Sometimes it comes in silence. A week later, I was at the grocery store when I ran into the school nurse from Daniel's kids' old elementary school. She recognized me immediately. Oh, Olivia. How are those little ones? I hesitated. I'm not sure. I haven't seen them in a while. She looked surprised. Oh, I thought you were their mother, the way you were always there. That stayed with me. All those years, parenting children who weren't mine, in a family that never saw me as more than a fallback. And yet to the outside world, I was their safe person. I went home and sat in the quiet. I remembered every lunch I packed, every sick day I covered, every scraped knee I kissed. I hadn't been a mother by title, but I had been one in effort, in love. And no one could take that from me. Then one evening Rachel called with an idea. Let's take a trip. Just us. Somewhere new. We chose a small town by the coast. Rented a cottage. Drank wine on the porch. Walked barefoot on the beach. Laughed so much my ribs hurt. One night I told her about the letter. She listened, then asked, do you want to see them again? I thought about it. Really thought. I don't know, I said. I miss the kids. But I don't miss the way I felt around them. Rachel nodded. That's fair. I realized then that I didn't have to decide right away. Maybe ever. Some doors stay closed not out of bitterness, but because peace lives on the other side. Back home, I started volunteering at a community center, tutoring kids after school, helping with crafts. It felt good to give again, but this time by choice. One little girl hugged me goodbye one day and said, "I wish you were my aunt." I smiled and said, "Me too." That night, I opened Daniel's letter one more time. I read it slowly, then I wrote one of my own. "Daniel, thank you for your letter. I'm glad you're trying. I don't hate you. I just needed space to heal. I'm still healing. Maybe one day the kids and I can reconnect. But right now, I'm focusing on me. Please tell them I think about them. Take care. Olivia." I didn't send it, but I didn't throw it away either. Some truths are just for us. It's been a year since I closed the door on Daniel. 12 months of space, of silence, of choosing myself. Sometimes I still hear from distant relatives, emails, occasional holiday cards with passive-aggressive notes like, "Hope you find your way back to family." I don't respond. The truth is, I did find my way back to family. It just wasn't the one I was born into. I now have my own little circle. Rachel, a few friends from the community center, my therapist, the barista at the coffee shop who remembers my name and asks how Henry the cat is doing. These people don't need me to perform. They just let me be. One Sunday morning while watering my plants, I got a knock at the door. It was Daniel's oldest, Mia. 13 now. Taller. Her hair pulled back in a ponytail just like her mother used to do it. I froze. She held a small bag in her hands. "Hi, Aunt Olivia." I opened the door. "Hi, sweetheart. Does your dad know you're here?" She nodded. "He dropped me off. Said you might want this." She handed me the bag. Inside was a photo. Old. Faded. It was me, holding Mia when she was a baby, both of us asleep on the couch. I hadn't seen it in years. There was a note. "She misses you. I miss you. Maybe we can visit sometimes." I looked at Mia. She was biting her lip, uncertain. I stepped aside and said, "Would you like to come in?" She smiled and walked inside. We made hot chocolate. She told me about school, about her brother, about how dad still doesn't do much but is trying, how grandma isn't doing well, but still talks about me like I ran off to join a cult. I laughed. I couldn't help it. She laughed too. "I think you just got tired of being the only adult in the room." I looked at her, really looked, and realized she wasn't asking me to save anyone. She just wanted to remember the person who once made her feel safe. And that I could do. She came back the next weekend. Then the one after. No demands. No guilt. Just small moments. Games. Tea. A walk in the park. I never reopened the door to Daniel or Mom. I didn't need to. But Mia's presence reminded me that healing isn't a wall. It's a boundary. One that protects what matters. A few months later, Rachel and I started a weekend group at the community center for women over 50. We didn't call it therapy. We called it stories. We sat in circles and talked about mothers who didn't love right, about siblings who took and took, about husbands who vanished. We cried. We laughed. We healed. Sometimes, I'd glance at the clock and realize hours had passed. And I hadn't thought about the old house, or the group chat, or that birthday I wasn't invited to. I was here. Fully. One evening, Mia helped me hang string lights in the backyard. As we stood under the soft glow, she said, "I think this is what family is supposed to feel like." I smiled. Yeah, me too. I no longer needed apologies, or recognition, or redemption arcs. I had my peace. And for the first time in 40 years, I wasn't surviving. I was living. If you like stories like these, click like, subscribe, activate the bell, and send it to someone you think will also like it.